I'm a very big fan of animated films. I love anything that deals with fairy stories, particularly if it's giving it a new and exciting angle. So, Charming, the 2018 film by Ross Venokur, could have gone either way for me. It could have been a really fascinating look at a very classic character, Prince Charming, of course, or it could have been a little bit dull. And unfortunately, I feel like it falls into the latter category. On its own, in isolation, if I had never seen an animation before, or if I'd never seen an abundance of them, because I'm aware that I've watched more animated films than the average 30-year-old adult. But if I hadn't had that many to choose from, then maybe I would have found it to be quite exciting, a little bit interesting style of animation, some good pacing, a relatively interesting narrative. We have several princesses who suddenly realise they're all engaged to this same guy. And certainly that makes Prince Charming seem like a bit of a sleazeball. And I think that that was a really interesting angle to take, and I found it quite interesting. But because I have seen so many other films that try and break the mold and do it very well, I felt like this one fell a little bit flat. It wasn't terrible, it wasn't completely unfunny, the narrative didn't feel forced, it developed at a pretty decent pace. I just didn't think it was anything particularly charming. The narrative, of course, revolving around Prince Charming being a bit of a sleazeball and being engaged to these various different princesses, is interesting, and I didn't know how they were going to handle this or what they would do with this. I was curious to see if he would end up being engaged to anybody, because he has to find a bride. It's part of his duty as a prince before he eventually becomes king. How will he do this? Will he end up with any of them? I had a sneaky suspicion of what might happen. I wasn't completely correct, so it's not completely predictable. It is quite fresh, and I think having Prince Charming being not the heroic hero as we all see him as, saving the damsel in distress, or indeed saving somebody who is down on her luck and needs her Prince Charming to pick her up off of the ground. Having him being slightly different from that I thought worked quite well, but there was just nothing particularly interesting about it, and it's not that it's not unique, because I've never seen Prince Charming handled in this way before. Although I'm trying to think of what he's like in Into the Woods. Maybe slightly. But generally speaking, I thought it was quite fresh. It definitely gets brownie points there. It's a little bit funny. It's unpredictable in some ways. It's not a bad film. It's just not necessarily what I would have expected. It's not as exciting as I would have expected. The animation style is fairly decent. I know this is a very flat word, but it's an okay film. I know I should come up with some brilliant buzzwords to describe this and, say that it's, well, obviously not a marvel or, an atrocity. It's none of these things. It's just an okay film. If you like animation, you'll probably find it quite a pleasant, easy watch that will kill an hour and a half, give or take, and may make you think about Prince Charming as a character and how he is treated in other films. It definitely has a brilliant voice cast, and this is reflected in the voice acting. To name just a few, we have Demi Lovato, Sia, Avril Lavigne, Ashley Tisdale, the brilliant Jim Cummings, of course. It wouldn't be an animation without Jim Cummings. Cory Edwards, of course, as well. Tara Strong. In terms of the voice acting, it's good quality. The animation style is quite pleasing. The narrative is interesting enough. The treatment of Prince Charming I thought was quite fascinating. So there's nothing about it that I would say is fundamentally bad. It's just not as good as I perhaps had hoped. If you're looking for a fun, easy viewing, Charming is definitely one that will fit the bill. If you want something that's breaking the mold in ways that is sensational, maybe not quite. But it's interesting enough. I'd love to know your thoughts on this and what you thought of it, and particularly how Charming as a character was represented. For me personally, I can't imagine I'd watch it again, but I don't mind having spent the time watching it.